Om Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My humble pranams to Revered Swami Swatma Ramanaji Maharaj and Revered Swami Chandikanandaji Maharaj, and my namaskars to all of you. Thank you so much for welcoming me. It's my first time in South Africa. It's a real joy. I've been friends for a long time with Vipranandaji Maharaj, and he's known me since my joining at Vivekananda University in Belur. So I'm looking forward to seeing him also. So he's told me a lot about South Africa. I've heard so many things, so finally I get to enjoy it for myself firsthand. Thank you so much for coming. And my apologies in advance if my talk is a little incoherent or if I'm falling asleep during it, because I've been traveling for 30 hours, 30 hours. I came from Los Angeles, flew from Los Angeles to Istanbul to Johannesburg, and then I sat on the plane in Johannesburg for another 2.5 hours, and then finally came to Durban a couple hours ago. And today's talk, fortunately, will not be too erudite. It'll be more fun. I hope it'll be more fun. Because it's on Sri Ramakrishna's humor. You know, these days we have 5G. I don't know if there's 6G yet. Is there 6G? No, 5G is where we're at. But I'm happy with 2G. 2G is Gita and Gospel. These are the two things I need in my life to be happy. Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Such an amazing scripture. I'm sure we've read so many great scriptures, the teachings of great saints from different religious traditions, but there's something really unique about the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. There are many things that are unique about it. One of the things is Medhanandaji. Maharaj knows him well. I was in Mysore for 1.5 years, and Medhanandaji is the head there and a trustee. He would often give talks on the Gospel, and he would say that the beauty of reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is that it's a very high spiritual practice. Just by reading it, it's a very great spiritual practice. And he gave it a name, this sadhana of reading the Gospel. He said it's Sri Ramakrishna Sannidhya Sadhana. Sri Ramakrishna Sannidhya Sadhana. That means you're practicing the presence of Sri Ramakrishna. Because the text is not just a record of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. It's much more than that. It's a record of his day-to-day life. It's a record of his moment-to-moment behavior. And it's a record of his hilarious jokes. He would constantly crack jokes. A very unusual saint. So I want to focus on that today. Sri Ramakrishna's humor. What was so special about Sri Ramakrishna's humor? Let's start by, I'm a scholar, so I have to start with the definition. Let's define a joke so that we're all on the same page. Oxford Dictionary defines a joke as a thing that someone says to cause amusement or laughter. Anything that you say that will make other people laugh. Notice that's a very broad definition. Sometimes people will say a joke has to have a certain structure with a setup and a punchline. That's one kind of joke, but I'm defining joke in a broader way. Sri Ramakrishna is constantly cracking jokes. And in fact, if you look at the Gospel, you'll find on every page almost this statement, everybody laughs. Shokolet Hasho. The text was, of course, originally written in Bangla, Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita. So everybody's enjoy, laughing constantly. And I think that we underestimate Sri Ramakrishna's comedic genius, actually. He was a spiritual genius, no doubt, but he was a comedic genius also. And the two things were inextricably related. That was a fundamental aspect of his spiritual genius, of his spiritual being. So in the short time that I have, I wanted to talk about a few things. First of all, why do we laugh at jokes? This is a kind of a philosophical question. Why do we laugh at jokes? Why do we take pleasure in jokes? What's the value of humor in life? And what can Sri Ramakrishna teach us about the value of humor in life? Okay. Interestingly, there's a whole subfield within academic philosophy called the philosophy of humor. And philosophers write very seriously, books and articles writing on the nature of humor, why we laugh at jokes, what is the value of humor in life, these kinds of things. And so far, in the West, there are three main philosophical theories of humor, the nature of humor. And I'll just run through them very, very quickly, and as a way of framing our discussion of Sri Ramakrishna. So, the first very dominant theory of humor is called the superiority theory of humor. Superiority theory of humor. If you want to know who taught this theory, the great philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, Hobbes. The idea here is that when we laugh, we are expressing our feeling of superiority over other people. We're laughing at other people's expense. I'm better than you, and so I'm laughing. Okay. It's because many religious traditions have this kind of theory of humor. You'll find that this is common in Christianity also, this theory of humor. It's because of that many Christian monasteries, they forbid laughter. They say you should not be making jokes, you shouldn't laugh. A monk should not be laughing. Thank God that we are not Christian monks. We're Ramakrishna monks. We can feel free to laugh. And I'll just mention, it's quite interesting. Some of you may not know this. So Saint Benedict, there are many monasteries based on the Benedictine tradition. And there's a book he wrote called Ladder of Humility. These are the rules for monks in the Benedictine order in Christianity. Step 10 is a restraint against laughter. Monks should not laugh. They're not allowed to laugh. And they're not allowed to joke. Step 11, no joking. In another monastery, there are punishments for laughing and smiling. So I'll just quote to you the rule in this monastery. He who smiles in the service, 6 strokes, lashes. If he breaks out in the noise of laughter, a special fast, unless it has happened pardonably. So it's unforgivable. Laughing, joking, no way. That's because it's based on this superiority theory of humor, because the more you laugh, the more your ego is going to increase. This is the idea. You'll become more egoistic, more arrogant. You're going to develop a superiority complex, right? The first theory of humor, very common. Second theory of humor is what's called the relief theory of humor. This is the idea that we have pent-up emotional, psychic energy that's stored up in us, in the unconscious, and that when we laugh, we release that energy. So the joy we get is from releasing that pent-up energy. One of the major philosophers / psychologists who defended this view is Sigmund Freud. Many of you, of course, know about Sigmund Freud. He wrote a whole book on jokes. I don't know if you know about this. It's a book called Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious, published in 1905. And he basically makes this claim that we have certain unconscious desires that we repress in day-to-day life. And when we laugh at a joke, we're releasing that pent-up unconscious energy. That's the idea. Third theory of humor is what's called the incongruity theory of humor. Incongruity theory of humor. Okay. The idea is that we laugh when we perceive something incongruous. We're not expecting something, and we get the opposite of what we're expecting. So I'll give you a simple example with a dumb joke. I just found this on Google, so don't expect anything too great. But it's funny. I like it. So here's the joke, short little joke to illustrate the incongruity theory of humor. A pair of cows, so 2 cows are talking to each other in a field. One cow says to the other cow, "Have you heard about the mad cow disease that's going around?" "Yeah," the other cow says. "Makes me glad I'm a penguin." It's funny, right? So how does this illustrate incongruity? The idea is you're not expecting that cow to have mad cow disease, right? But he thinks he's a penguin, which means he has mad cow. So let's keep these 3 theories in mind. What are these three theories? Superiority theory, relief theory, and incongruity theory. Now, what I would like to suggest, humbly, is that Sri Ramakrishna presents an entirely new spiritual theory of humor. It doesn't fall into any of these categories. He shows how humor can be spiritualized, how it can be fundamentally spiritual. So that's why I was actually tempted to call this talk, playing on the title of Sigmund Freud's book, Jokes and Their Relation to the Superconscious. Because Freud's book is called Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious. Sri Ramakrishna's humor is jokes and their relation to the superconscious. God. What is God in Vedanta? Raso Vaisaha. Taittiriya Upanishad. This is a beautiful, very succinct definition of the divine in Vedanta. Raso Vaisaha. God is bliss. God is joy. God is love. God is humor. In Indian languages, rasa also can mean humor. Rasaraj. There's an article actually written in Bangla by some Swami, I believe, called Rosharaj Sri Ramakrishna. Rasaraja Sri Ramakrishna, the king of humor, the king of jokes, the jokester. So for Sri Ramakrishna, when we laugh, when we tell jokes, we're expressing our divine nature as bliss, as Satchit Ananda. Thank you so much for the people who sang the bhajans, the beautiful bhajans. And it really elevates the mind and makes you think of Satchitananda. So I see Sri Ramakrishna as turning Freud on his head. Freud said, jokes, when we laugh, we're releasing our pent-up unconscious energy. Sri Ramakrishna says, when we laugh, we're expressing our deeper spiritual nature, our nature as divine bliss. That's why Sri Ramakrishna, in the Gospel, he defines God as Rosh Shorup, Rasa Swarupa. Very much like this Taittiriya Upanishad. Rasa Swarupa. It's the essence of bliss and fun and joy. Sri Ramakrishna, in 1884, this is from the Gospel also, he says, "The mother has kept me in the state of a bhakta, a vijnani. That is why I joke with Rakhal and the others. Had I been in the condition of a jnani, I couldn't do that. In this state, I realize that it is Divine Mother alone who has become everything. I see Divine Mother everywhere. In the Kali temple, I found that the Mother herself had become everything, even the wicked." So he sees nothing but God. So how can he not be full of bliss and joy and laughter and humor? So now, let's talk about some of Sri Ramakrishna's jokes. And of course, this will not be exhaustive. I could go on for hours. And I'm sure all of us have our favorite jokes of Sri Ramakrishna's, and we can share them later also. But I wanted to share with you some of my favorite jokes. And I also want to discuss what are the main purposes of the jokes that Sri Ramakrishna tells. What are the spiritual purposes behind these jokes? There's always a deeper spiritual lesson behind all of Sri Ramakrishna's humor, behind all of his jokes. They're not just jokes. We laugh, we take joy, great joy in them, but we also learn something very profound about spiritual life. So, one lesson we learn from Sri Ramakrishna's jokes is that, remember, among these three theories, one of them is the superiority theory. What Sri Ramakrishna does with some of his jokes is he flips this superiority theory around. So instead of laughing at the expense of other people, we laugh at our own expense. We're learning to laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves so seriously. And I'll give you an example, one of my favorite jokes. Sri Ramakrishna, we don't give him enough credit for his knowledge of English. We assume he didn't know English, but he knew quite a few words. He said thank you, he said science, philosophy, he said philosophy in a Bengali accent, philosophy. But another word, a very special word, we'll find out soon. I don't want to spoil the surprise. So this is from the Gospel entry from December 6th, 1884. He uses a nice English word. And he begins by giving very profound spiritual teachings about Sri Krishna and Radha. Sri Krishna is the Purusha. Srimati, meaning Radha, is his Shakti, the primal power. The The two are Purusha and Prakriti, and so on. He's explaining all this. Now, present in the room at the time was a great and very brilliant writer named Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Many of you have heard of him, Bankim. He's there. And he's highly educated, and so if you're very educated, this is during British colonial rule. So a way of showing that you're highly educated and superior is you speak in English instead of Bengali. So Bankim is speaking to some other people in English after Sri Ramakrishna spoke. Sri Ramakrishna doesn't know English, and so he looked at Bankim and he said, "Well, gentlemen, what are you talking about in English?" And then Adhar, one of these householder devotees, said, "We are discussing what you have just said, your explanation of Krishna's form." And then he tells a story, Sri Ramakrishna, smiling. "That reminds me of a funny story. It makes me want to laugh. Once a barber was shaving a gentleman. The gentleman was cut slightly by the razor. At once he cried out, 'Damn!' The English word damn. But the barber didn't know the meaning of the word. He put his razor and other shaving articles aside, tucked up his shirt sleeves, it was winter, and said, 'You said damn to me. Now you must tell me its meaning.' The gentleman said, 'Don't be silly. Go on with your shaving. The word doesn't mean anything in particular, but shave a little more carefully.' But the barber wouldn't let him off so easily. He said, 'If damn means something good, then I am a dam, my father is a dam, and all my ancestors are dams.' All laugh. 'But if it means something bad, then you are a dam, your father is a dam, and all your ancestors are dams.' All laugh. They are not only dams, but damn, damn, damn to damn, damn." Loud laughter. Everybody's just bursting into laughter at this point. Another one of the English words that Sri Ramakrishna knew and used to hilarious effect. But what's he doing here? It's not just a funny story. What is he doing? Just imagine, God himself has incarnated in the form of Sri Ramakrishna, and he's poking fun at himself for not knowing English. This is called self-deprecating humor. God himself is showing us how to laugh at ourselves. One of the biggest problems now in today's age, there are many problems, but one of them is mental health issues. Depression, anxiety, many other things are cropping up because of social media and technology and all these different reasons. And I think one of the main reasons for a lot of these mental health issues is that we take ourselves too seriously. We need to learn to laugh at ourselves. Take a step back from ourselves and laugh. And Sri Ramakrishna, God himself, is giving us the example of how to do that. Another example. This is also from the Gospel. Sri Ramakrishna mentions an incident with Keshab Chandra Sen. He was a great leader of the Brahmo Samaj movement and a wonderful speaker also. Sri Ramakrishna loved him. So Sri Ramakrishna is talking about this, about Keshab. He said, one day, Keshab came here with his followers. They stayed till 10 at night. We were all seated in the Panchavati. Pratap and several others said they would like to spend the night here. Keshab said, "No, I must go. I have some work to do." I laughed and said, "Can't you sleep without the smell of your fish basket?" Once a fisherwoman was a guest in the house of a gardener who raised flowers. She came there with her empty basket after selling fish in the market and was asked to sleep in a room where flowers were kept. But because of the fragrance of the flowers, she couldn't get to sleep for a long time. Her hostess saw her condition and said, "Hello, why are you tossing from side to side so restlessly?" The fisherwoman said, "I don't know, friend. Perhaps the smell of the flowers has been disturbing my sleep. Can you give me my fish basket? Perhaps that will put me to sleep." The basket was brought to her. She sprinkled water on it and set it near her nose. Then she fell sound asleep and snored all night. And the Bangla, see, one thing that we're missing if we don't know Bangla is that it's even more hilarious in the Bangla. So he's actually mimicking the sound of her snoring. Sheshe aashchupri anate jol chite naker kache bho bho kore ghumote laglo. Bho bho is the Bengali for snoring. Bho bho. So at this story, the followers of Keshab burst into loud laughter. So again, this is a very interesting story, very funny, and everybody's laughing. It seems like they're laughing basically at Keshav, right? But at the same time, what ends up happening is that laughter, as they're laughing, they realize, wait a minute, but we are the fisherwoman. Every single one of us is a fisherwoman. Who dares to say that we are not the fisherwoman? Not just Keshav. Sri Ramakrishna's Jagadguru is telling all of us, we're satisfied with so many things in the world. Who among us can say we want God alone? And so this is a kind of humor that forces us to turn the mirror back at ourselves and realize our own limitations from a spiritual standpoint, that we have so much further to go. So that laughter becomes uncomfortable when we realize that we're actually the fisherwoman. Another one of my favorite examples. This comes from December 18th, 1883, from the Gospel. Sri Ramakrishna had a very wealthy householder devotee named Jodu Mollik, who would visit him frequently. Jodu. So Jodu is visiting him along with his entourage. You know, rich people have to have an entourage. Otherwise, you have to show that you're rich, right? So he brought his entourage with him. And this is M's description. From the temple, the master went, master went to Jodu Mollik's house, actually, a very wealthy house, fancy house. Jodu was surrounded by his admirers, well-dressed dandies. He welcomed the master. Sri Ramakrishna, one thing about him, he was disarmingly blunt. And he would just say things without any filter. This is an example of that. So he comes to Jodu Mollik's house and he says, Sri Ramakrishna says, with a smile, why do you keep so many clowns and flatterers with you? In front of the clowns and flatterers, he's asking him. Jodu, smiling, that you may liberate them. Laughter. Sri Ramakrishna. And then he tells a story. Flatterers think that the rich man will loosen his purse strings for them, but it is very difficult to get anything from him. Once, a jackal saw a bullock and would not give up his company. The bullock roamed about, and the jackal followed him. The jackal thought, there hang the bullock's testicles. Sometime or other, they will drop to the ground, and I shall eat them. When the bullock slept on the ground, the jackal lay down too, and when the bullock moved about, the jackal followed him. Many days passed in this way, but the bullock's testicles still clung to his body. The jackal went away disappointed. All laugh. That also happens to flatterers. Sri Ramakrishna, he's saying this hilarious story to Jodu Mollik in front of his flatterers. So again, another function of humor in the hands of Sri Ramakrishna is that he uses humor to gently poke at people, gently, in a humorous way, to make people aware of their limitations and where they need a push. He gives them a push, but in a very gentle way, so that you don't feel the sting when he says it. So it's a beautiful use of humor that Sri Ramakrishna would use. Another example, this is from June 15th, 1884. See, at that time, Brahma Samaj was extremely popular. And the preachers were householders. Some of them spoke very well, like Keshav Chandra Sen. But Sri Ramakrishna warned against speaking without having the adesha, which means the command from God. So he would often ask Keshav even, do you have the command from God to speak? So it's in that context. He's speaking to a Brahma Samaj member. He said, one can very well understand the inner feeling of a teacher of your Brahma Samaj by hearing his preaching. Once I went to a meeting of a Hari Sabha. The preacher of the day was a Pandit named Samadhyayi. And can you imagine what he said? He said in the course of his sermon, God is dry. We must make him sweet and fresh with our love and devotion. I was stunned to hear these words. Then I was reminded of a story. A boy once said, at my uncle's house there are many horses. Oh yes, his whole cowshed is full of horses. At Goal Ghoda. Now if it was really a cowshed, then horses could not be kept there. Possibly he had only cows. What did people think on hearing such an incoherent statement? They believed that there were surely no such animals as horses in the shed. Laughter. A devotee. True, sir, there were not only no horses, but possibly there were also no cows. Laughter. Sri Ramakrishna. Just fancy, to describe God who is of the very nature of love and bliss, rasa swarupa, as dry. It only proves that the person has never experienced what God is like. So again, using humor to point out other people's limitations and curbing their ego, but in a very gentle way. Another one of my favorite parables of Sri Ramakrishna's, this is also from the Gospel. He says, smiling, I have practiced all the disciplines. I accept all paths. I respect the Shaktas, the Vaishnavas, and also the Vedantins. Therefore, people of all sects come here. And every one of them thinks that I belong to his school. A person had a tub of dye. Such was its wonderful property that people could dye their clothes any color they wanted by merely dipping them in it. So you see, in other versions of the story, he tells it in a more elaborate way. There's a washerman, magical washerman. He's got one big tub of dye. And there's a big line of people. First person in line says, I want my shirt yellow. He brings a white t-shirt. So he says, okay. So he takes the white t-shirt, dips it in the tub of dye, comes out yellow. Next person in line comes, and the washerman asks, what color do you want it? He says, I want it red. Takes the white t-shirt, puts it in the same tub of dye, it comes out red. Next person blue, next person green. And the fifth, sixth, seventh person, they're looking at this extraordinary phenomenon, amazed, right? How could the same tub of dye be producing all these different colors? So then when he comes to the front of the line, this washerman asks, so what color do you want your shirt in? So then this clever person says, dye my cloth the color of your dye stuff. It's very profound. Dye my t-shirt, that white t-shirt, the color of your dye stuff. I don't want it just orange or just yellow or just blue. I want it to be all the colors, because that magical dye itself is all the colors. It's universal. Sri Ramakrishna is conveying a very profound spiritual truth through this teaching. He's the washerman. Everybody who comes to him will feel that he belongs to their sect, but that's because he belongs to all the sects. Sampradayavid. And he belonged to all the sampradayas. And because of that, he was able to speak to everybody on their own terms, in their own language. There's a wonderful quality of his. Another example, he had a lot of stories with animals, and one of them, or several of them, involve ants. So this is one of my favorites involving an ant. He says, a person reads a little of the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavata, or the Vedanta, and thinks he has understood everything. Once an ant went to a hill of sugar. 1 grain of sugar filled its stomach, and it was returning home with another grain in its mouth. On the way, it said to itself, next time I go, I shall bring home the whole hill. All laugh. Again, using humor to convey the infinitude, the vastness of God, that you can never place a limit to God. Never say, I have completely understood God, because there's always something beyond and beyond. Bhagavana kono iti nai, he would say. You can never place a limit to the divine. Another example, to explain this, the difficulty of understanding or recognizing an avatara. We all say Sri Ramakrishna is an avatara, but how many of us really internalize that teaching? So he says, it is hard to recognize an incarnation of God unless the mind is totally free from lust and greed. A man asked a seller of eggplants the value of a diamond. He said, I can give you 9 ounces of eggplants in exchange, and not one more. And that's our predicament. And again, this makes us a little uncomfortable, because we're in the position of the eggplant seller. We've been given a priceless treasure. Many of you have received initiation. We've been given the holy name of Sri Ramakrishna. We do our japa. But how sincerely and with how much feeling are we taking Sri Ramakrishna's name? Do we really feel that nama and namni are abhed? He would teach that the name and God himself are one and the same. Every time we take the name of God, we're actually invoking the divine in our hearts. Do we really feel that? How many of us can say that? So again, we're all that eggplant seller. We're given a diamond, and we're judging it like, I'll exchange it for 5 eggplants. I'll take it for 5 eggplants. Another thing you would do, and again, this is very tricky to explain without Bengali. He was a great wordsmith. Constantly he would be engaging in wordplay, a lot of rhyming. So a lot of his teachings are like that. Like for instance, he would say, Shah, Shah, Shah. One example, Shah, Shah, Shah. What, does anyone know what it means? The idea is that in the Sanskrit alphabet and Bengali alphabet, there are 3 S sounds, 3 S letters. And they all sound the same, actually. Shah, Shah, Shah. In Bengali. In Sanskrit, they're pronounced differently. In Bengali, they're pronounced exactly the same. Shah, Shah, Shah. And in Bengali, Shah means to endure, to forbear, to be patient. And so he's, just with those 3 letters, Shah, 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 he's saying, endure, 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 forbear, forbear, forbear. Be patient. Accept hardship with calmness, with joy. And the beauty of it is, because of that rhyme, because of the succinct wordplay, these teachings get etched in your mind. Another example. Dhyan korbe mone bone okone. How should you meditate? Where should you meditate? He says, Dhyan korbe mone, in your own mind. Bone, in a forest, in a secluded forest. Kone, in the corner of a room. Dhyan korbe mone bone okone. And you see the rhyme there. So the moment you hear the teaching, it gets seared into your mind because of that wordplay. He was a genius at that. Another time, so I told you that the Brahma Samaj was very popular at the time, but it split into many different sects. So Keshav was the leader of one of them. Bijoy Krishna Goswami was the leader of a different sect, a breakaway sect of the Brahma Samaj. So they didn't really get along. But Sri Ramakrishna loved both of them, and they're on a boat together. Sri Ramakrishna is there, Keshav is there, Bijoy is there, and their followers are also there on the boat, and there's a lot of tension. Sri Ramakrishna noticed the tension, and so he said the following. He said, look here. He's speaking to Keshav. There is Bijoy. Your quarrel seems like the fight between Shiva and Rama. Shiva was Rama's guru. Though they fought with each other, yet they soon came to terms. But the grimaces of the ghosts, the followers of Shiva, and the gibberish of the monkeys, the followers of Rama, would not come to an end. Loud laughter. See, here again, there's a profound spiritual truth here. You're going to find, in the history of world religions, the founders of the great religions, they were as broad as the sky. They didn't quarrel. Their followers are the ones who became more narrow, more fanatical, more sectarian. The followers tend to be more sectarian and fanatical than the original founders. And this is what he's saying. Keshav and Vijay will make up soon, but the followers will be at each other's throats, like Hanuman's monkeys and Shiva's ghouls. So, I'll just sum up. What practical tips can we come away with in light of Sri Ramakrishna's humor? A few things. First of all, you have to get rid of the wrong idea that in order to be spiritual, you have to be serious all the time. Swami Vivekananda used to say, religion is not for dyspeptics. Religion is not for dyspeptics. So what does he mean? Dyspeptic means somebody with stomach trouble. So he's got this serious look, frown on his face. Some people think the more serious you look, the more religious you are, the more spiritual you are. And this is absolutely false. If you're really spiritual, you should be full of joy. You should be smiling. Otherwise, something is going wrong in your spiritual life. When I joined in Belumat, 2010, there the Mangalarati is at 4 in the morning, 4 or 4:30, depending on the time of year. And then afterward, I would jog in this private area. And a monk, the same monk, I would see the same monk almost every day. He would walk in that same area. And every time he saw me, he would just ask me one question. And he passed away shortly thereafter, but he would say, in Bengali, he said, Anande acho to, which means, are you happy? Are you in joy? Are you experiencing joy? That's the one question he asked me. And he always had a smile on his face. That's the one test in spiritual life. Are you deriving joy from your spiritual life and your spiritual practice? So that's one very important teaching to keep in mind. Second, we should never feel guilty about laughing in humor. Why? Because the divine is, in her very essence, rasa. Raso vaisaha. Sri Ramakrishna. Rasa swarupa. Because God is rasa, because God is joy and bliss and humor and fun, we should always, whenever we laugh, instead of feeling guilty, we should realize that we're expressing our divine nature, our inner spiritual nature. Third, I already mentioned this, but it's very, very important these days. So if you take nothing else away, take this away. We need to learn to laugh at ourselves. We should learn not to take ourselves so seriously. It's very, very important. And Sri Ramakrishna gave the example. He would make fun of himself, just imagine. So we have to learn from him. And finally, try to make a regular habit of reading the gospel daily, even just for a few minutes. I read it every night as a practice, and just before going to bed. It's a wonderful way to close the day. And as I said, because it's not just his teachings, you really feel his presence, his living presence, and it's just so funny. It'll lighten your day. No matter what you went through, whatever hell you went through that day, however much you suffered, whatever anguish, difficulties you had, read a few minutes of Kathamrita, of the gospel, and your troubles will melt away. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.